The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any known civilization. It floated in the darkness of space, far from any star, a massive ring of metal and glass that could hold millions of beings at once. Today, only a few thousand had gathered in the central chamber, but their presence filled the room with tension that Daniel Carter could feel pressing against his skin. Daniel was 43 years old, a former history teacher from a small town in Ohio who had somehow become the voice of humanity among the stars. He stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by raised platforms where representatives from 47 alien species looked down at him. Some had scales, others had feathers, and a few were made of living crystal that caught the light in strange ways. All of them were watching him with expressions he had learned to read over the past 5 years. They were not friendly expressions. The Velthri High Speaker rose from his seat. His name was Zorvax, and he was tall, nearly 8 feet, with a body that seemed carved from purple glass. When he moved, light passed through him and scattered across the walls in rainbow patterns. His voice was deep and carried easily through the chamber without any need for amplification. "The Council has reached a decision regarding the human species," Zorvax announced. "You have been members of the galactic community for only 23 of your Earth years. In that time, you have expanded to 14 colony worlds. You have built a military fleet of over 600 warships. You have developed weapons that concern us greatly." Daniel said nothing. He had learned that silence was often the best response when dealing with the Council. They expected humans to be loud and emotional. Staying calm made them uncomfortable, Zorvax continued. "The Council has determined that humanity poses a potential threat to galactic stability. Your species is too aggressive. Your history is filled with war and violence. You cannot be trusted to govern yourselves in matters of defense." A murmur ran through the chamber. Daniel noticed several alien representatives nodding in agreement. Others looked uncertain, but none spoke up in humanity's defense. Therefore, Zorvax said, "The Council demands the following. First, humanity will surrender 60% of its military fleet to Council control. Second, all weapons research facilities on Earth and its colonies will be dismantled. Third, human military operations will be placed under permanent Council oversight. You will not build new warships without our approval. You will not develop new weapons without our permission. You will submit to inspections at any time we choose." The chamber fell silent. Every eye, every sensor, every crystalline face turned toward Daniel Carter. He took a slow breath. He thought about his wife, Maria, waiting for him back on Earth. He thought about his daughter, Lucy, who was 12 years old and dreamed of becoming an astronaut. He thought about the billions of humans who were counting on him to protect their future. "High Speaker Zorvax," Daniel said, his voice steady, "on behalf of the United Earth government, I must respectfully decline." The silence that followed was unlike anything Daniel had ever experienced. It was not just quiet, it was empty. As if the universe itself had stopped to listen. Then the chaos began. Zorvax's crystalline body flashed with angry red light. "You cannot decline. No species has ever refused the Council's demands. This is not a negotiation. This is a requirement." "I understand," Daniel replied. "But humanity will not surrender its ability to defend itself. We will not place our future in the hands of others. We have seen what happens to species that do." He was referring to the Morvathi, peaceful people who had given up their weapons 2 centuries ago at the Council's request. Now they worked in mines on their own homeworld, digging up minerals for Velthri factories. Daniel had visited their planet once. He had seen the exhaustion in their eyes, the hopelessness. He had promised himself that Earth would never suffer the same fate. "You are making a grave mistake," Zorvax warned. "The Council has the power to enforce its decisions. We have done so before. We will do so again." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand the risks. But some things are worth fighting for. Freedom is one of them." He turned and walked toward the exit. Behind him, the chamber erupted in shouting. Some aliens called for immediate military action. Others demanded more time for negotiation. A few, very few, watched Daniel leave with something that might have been respect. The journey back to Earth took 3 days. Daniel spent most of that time in his small cabin, staring out the window at the stars. He knew what was coming. The Council would not accept his refusal. They would try to force humanity into submission, just as they had done with so many others. But Daniel also knew something the Council did not understand. Humans were different. They had spent their entire history fighting for survival, first against nature, then against each other, and finally against their own worst impulses. They had learned, painfully and slowly, that freedom was precious. They would not give it up easily. When his ship landed in Geneva, President Laura Mitchell was waiting for him. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, 61 years old and in the third year of her second term. She had been a soldier once, before entering politics, and she still carried herself with military precision. "How bad is it?" she asked as they walked toward the waiting convoy. "Bad," Daniel admitted. "They gave us no room to negotiate. It was submit or face the consequences." Laura nodded. She had expected this. Then we prepare for consequences. That night, she addressed the United Nations General Assembly. The hall was packed with representatives from every nation on Earth, and billions more watched through screens around the world. "My fellow humans," Laura began, "today we were given a choice. We could surrender our freedom and trust our safety to beings who see us as dangerous children, or we could stand firm and face whatever comes." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I have chosen to stand. Not because I want war, not because I believe we cannot coexist with other species, but because I believe that no civilization, no matter how advanced, has the right to demand another's submission." The assembly hall was silent. Laura continued, "In the days ahead, we will face challenges unlike any we have known. The Council has vast resources and thousands of years of experience. They have crushed other species before. They believe they will crush us too." She straightened her shoulders and looked directly into the cameras. "They are wrong. We are humanity. We have survived ice ages and plagues. We have split the atom and walked on the moon. We have made terrible mistakes and learned from them. We are flawed, but we are strong, and we do not kneel." The applause began slowly, then grew until it shook the walls. Around the world, people stood in their homes, in their offices, in the streets, and they cheered. Not because they were not afraid. They were terrified. But they were also proud. Daniel Carter watched the speech from a small office nearby. When it ended, he finally allowed himself to smile. The war was coming. That much was certain. But for the first time, he believed humanity might actually win. The stars had never seemed brighter. The blockade came 3 weeks after Daniel Carter's refusal. Admiral Kevin Torres stood on the bridge of the USS, Relentless, and watched through the viewport as thousands of alien warships took position around the Sol system. They formed a ring so dense that it blocked out the distant stars. A wall of metal and fire that surrounded everything humanity had ever known. Kevin was 56 years old, a career Navy man who had commanded ships since he was 25. He had gray hair cut short in military style and a face that showed every year of service. His crew looked to him for guidance, but today he had none to offer. He had never seen anything like this. 3,247 vessels confirmed, his tactical officer reported. Velthri, Crithoni, Sorvin, and 12 other species. They have taken positions at all major jump points. Nothing gets in or out without their permission. Kevin nodded slowly. The Council had not declared war. They did not need to. The blockade would do their work for them. Earth and its colonies depended on interstellar trade for dozens of essential resources. Without those supplies, the economy would collapse within months. Factories would close. Food would run short. People would panic, at least. That was what the aliens expected, Kevin. Opened a channel to Fleet Command on Earth. President Laura Mitchell appeared on screen. Looking tired but determined. "Admiral Torres," she said. "Status report." "The blockade is complete, Madam President. They have us surrounded on all sides. Our fleet is outgunned at least 5-1. Laura was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "What do you recommend?" Kevin had thought about this question for weeks. He had run simulations, consulted with his officers, and spent long nights staring at star charts. The answer was not what anyone wanted to hear. "Wait," he said. "We do not attack, and we do not provoke. We let them think their plan is working. Meanwhile, we prepare. Prepare for what? For whatever comes next." The waiting was the hardest part. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. The alien fleet sat motionless in the darkness, patient as stone. They sent no messages, made no demands. They simply watched and waited for humanity to break. But humanity did not break. On Earth, emergency measures went into effect. Rationing was introduced for non-essential goods. Factories switched from consumer products to military equipment. Scientists worked around the clock in labs that had been built underground, hidden from alien sensors. One of those scientists was Dr. Nicole Grant. She was 34 years old, a physicist who had spent her career studying the strange mathematics of space and time. Before the blockade, her work had been considered purely theoretical. Now it might be humanity's only hope. Nicole worked in a facility buried deep beneath the surface of Mars. Her team had been given one task: find a way to bypass the blockade. The aliens controlled all the known jump points, the natural shortcuts through space that made interstellar travel possible. But Nicole believed there might be another way. She stood in front of a whiteboard covered in equations, her dark hair tied back, and her eyes red from lack of sleep. Her colleague, Dr. Peter Walsh, watched her with concern. "You need rest," he said. "You have been working for 30 hours straight." Nicole shook her head. "I am close. I can feel it." The quantum entanglement data from last month showed something unusual. "If I can just figure out what it means, ... She trailed off, staring at the equations. Then suddenly, she grabbed a marker and started writing furiously. Numbers and symbols appeared on the board in a rush, connecting ideas that had seemed unrelated moments before. Peter watched in confusion. "What are you doing?" "The aliens use jump points because they are stable," Nicole explained without stopping. "They are natural phenomena, created by gravitational interactions between stars. But what if we could create our own? Artificial tunnels through space formed by quantum entanglement rather than gravity." "That is impossible," Peter said. "The energy requirements alone would be astronomical, not if we use a cascading resonance field." Nicole finished writing and stepped back. "Look, if we synchronize the quantum states of 2 points in space, we can create a temporary bridge between them. It would only last a few seconds, but that might be enough." Peter studied the equations. His skepticism slowly changed to wonder. "This could actually work." "It will work," Nicole said. "I know it will." 3 months later, she proved herself right. The first artificial wormhole opened in a testing facility on Europa, creating a doorway to a point in space 50 light-years away. It lasted only 4 seconds. But those 4 seconds changed everything. News of the breakthrough spread quickly through the human military. Suddenly, the blockade was not as impenetrable as it seemed. Supply ships could slip through artificial wormholes to reach friendly traders in uncontrolled space. Weapons and resources began flowing back to Earth, through channels the aliens could not monitor. Admiral Kevin Torres received a message from President Mitchell with new orders. He was to begin preparing the fleet for offensive operations. Not an attack on the blockade itself, but something more subtle. Human ships would use the new wormhole technology to strike at alien supply lines, disrupt their communications, and show the Council that their strategy was failing. Kevin smiled for the first time in months. The aliens had expected humanity to sit quietly and starve. They had not expected humans to adapt, to innovate, to find solutions to problems that seemed impossible. He called his senior officers to the bridge and laid out the plan. Small strike teams would slip through wormholes, hit enemy targets, and disappear before the aliens could respond. It was risky, but it was better than waiting to die. "We are not going to win this war by hiding," Kevin told his crew. "We are going to win it by showing the Council that we are not afraid." They wanted us to kneel. "Instead, we will punch them in the face." His officers laughed, but there was steel beneath the laughter. They were ready. The first raid launched 2 weeks later. A squadron of 12 ships emerged from a wormhole in the middle of an alien supply convoy. They destroyed 6 cargo vessels and 3 escort ships before vanishing back through the portal. The entire attack lasted less than 90 seconds. When the Council received word of what had happened, they were shocked. No blockaded species had ever struck back. No one had ever developed technology that the Council did not already possess. The humans were not behaving the way they were supposed to. Admiral Torres sent a single message to the alien. Fleet surrounding Sol, we are still here. We are not afraid. The Velthary commander who received the message did not respond. But deep in the darkness of space, the first cracks began to form in the Council's confidence. Humanity was just getting started. High Speaker Zorvax stood in his private chamber aboard the Council flagship and stared at the holographic display before him. The image showed a detailed map of human space, with red dots marking every location where human strike teams had hit Council forces in the past 3 months. There were dozens of them, scattered across hundreds of light years. His second in command, a Velthary officer named Torvax, stood nearby. "They're using some kind of teleportation technology we have never seen before," Torvax reported. "Our scientists believe it may be based on quantum entanglement, but they cannot understand how the humans made it work. The energy requirements should be impossible." Zorvax's crystalline body pulsed with dark red light. He was angry, but more than that, he was confused. The humans were supposed to be primitive. They had only discovered faster-than-light travel 40 years ago. How could they have developed technology that the Council, with thousands of years of advancement, had never imagined? "It does not matter how they did it," Zorvax said finally. "What matters is stopping them. The blockade has failed. It is time for direct action." Torvax hesitated. "High Speaker, a direct assault would be costly. The humans have fortified their core worlds extensively. Their defense platforms are formidable, and we will destroy those platforms first." Zorvax turned to face his officer. "Assemble a strike force. 300 warships, our best crews. We will enter the Sol system and eliminate their orbital defenses. Once those are gone, Earth itself will be vulnerable. The humans will have no choice but to surrender. And if they do not surrender," Zorvax's light turned cold blue, "then we will make an example of them that the galaxy will never forget." The attack came 2 days later. 300 Velthary warships emerged from their positions at the edge of the Sol system and began advancing toward Earth. Their formation was perfect. A wall of destruction that had crushed a dozen civilizations before. On Luna, Commander Ryan Ellis watched them come. He was 38 years old, a veteran of humanity's brief but intense space conflicts. He had dark skin, a shaved head, and calm brown eyes that never seemed to show fear. His team called him the Iceman because nothing ever rattled him. Today, even Ryan felt a flicker of nervousness. The approaching fleet was massive, and humanity's defenders were outnumbered nearly 10-1. But Ryan had spent months preparing for this moment. He knew things about the Velthary that they did not know about themselves. "All stations, report status," he said into his command console. One by one, his subordinates confirmed readiness. Defense platforms were powered up. Fighter squadrons were standing by. The new shield-piercing missiles developed in secret over the past 4 months were loaded and ready. "Remember your training," Ryan told his people. "The Velthary are used to enemies who run or surrender. They have never fought someone who hits back. Today we teach them what humans are made of." The Velthary fleet approached in standard formation, expecting the humans to retreat behind their orbital shields and wait for bombardment. Instead, the human defenders did something unexpected. They attacked. Captain Megan Sullivan led the first wave. She was 29 years old, a pilot who had grown up on a space station and learned to fly before she could walk. Her squadron, the Red Hawks, were the best fighter pilots in the human fleet. "All Hawks, follow my lead," she said, pushing her throttle forward. "We are going straight down their throat." Her fighter, a small craft called the Hornet, shot forward at incredible speed. Behind her, 47 other pilots followed without hesitation. They dove directly into the center of the Velthary formation, weaving between massive warships that tried and failed to track them. The Velthary were not prepared for close combat. Their weapons were designed for long-range bombardment, not dogfighting. Their shields were powerful, but slow to adjust to multiple small targets. Megan and her squadron exploited every weakness. "Missile away," Megan announced, firing a shield-piercing warhead at the nearest Velthary cruiser. The missile struck the ship's shield, burrowed through it like it was made of paper, and detonated against the hull. The cruiser exploded in a flash of purple light. All around her, similar scenes played out. Human fighters darted through the enemy fleet, striking and retreating before the Velthary could respond. The aliens tried to regroup, but every time they formed a new defensive pattern. The humans adapted faster. Commander Ryan Ellis watched the battle from his post on Luna, coordinating the defense with quick, precise orders. He saw opportunities the enemy missed and exploited them ruthlessly. When a group of Velthary ships broke formation to pursue a human squadron, Ryan sent a wave of missiles from the orbital platforms directly into their exposed flanks. "Keep the pressure on," he ordered. "Do not give them time to think." The battle lasted for hours. When it was over, the Velthary fleet was broken. 112 alien ships had been destroyed. Another 86 were too damaged to fight. The remaining vessels retreated in disorder, leaving behind fields of debris and the wreckage of their confidence. Humanity had lost 47 ships and over 200 pilots. Captain Megan Sullivan was among the wounded. Her fighter had been hit by enemy fire in the final minutes of the battle, and she had ejected just before it exploded. A rescue team found her floating in space, unconscious but alive. When she woke up in a hospital bed on Earth, Admiral Kevin Torres was sitting beside her. "You did good, Captain," he said quietly. "Your squadron turned the tide." Megan managed a weak smile. "We showed them, sir. We showed them what we can do." "Yes, you did." Kevin leaned back in his chair. "And now, the whole galaxy knows." News of the battle spread faster than light. Every species in the Galactic Council heard how the humans had not only survived the Velthary assault, but had crushed it. 300 warships against a handful of defenders, and the defenders had won. On a dozen worlds, beings who had been conquered by the Council began to whisper. If the humans could fight back, maybe others could too. Maybe the Council was not as invincible as everyone believed. High Speaker Zorvax received the battle report in silence. His crystalline body flickered through a dozen colors, none of them pleasant. He had expected a quick victory, a demonstration of Council power that would force the humans to submit. Instead, he had suffered the worst military defeat in Council history. "This changes nothing," he told his advisors, though his voice lacked conviction. "We will send more ships. We will overwhelm them with numbers." But deep down, Zorvax knew the truth. Something had shifted in the galaxy. The humans had shown that the Council could be beaten, and once that idea took root, it would be very hard to kill. On Earth, President Laura Mitchell held a press conference to announce the victory. Behind her, screens showed images of the battle of burning Velthary warships and human pilots returning home. The crowd cheered until their voices gave out. "Today," Laura said, "we proved that courage and determination can overcome any odds. We proved that humanity will not be conquered, will not be silenced, will not disappear quietly into the night. We are here to stay, and we are just getting started." The stars had witnessed many empires rise and fall. Now they were about to witness something new. The message arrived on 100 different worlds at the same moment. It was a simple video, less than 2 minutes long, showing human fighters destroying Velthary warships. The footage was raw and unedited, captured by cameras mounted on the defense platforms around Earth. At the end of the video, 3 words appeared on screen: "They can bleed." No one knew who sent the message. Some said it was human intelligence agents. Others claimed it was sympathetic members of other species who wanted to spread hope. It did not matter who sent it. What mattered was what happened next. On Morvath, the amphibian homeworld, a mining foreman named Grell watched the video on a hidden screen in his quarters. He was old by Morvathy standards, His blue-green skin faded to gray, his body bent from decades of hard labor. He had been born into slavery and had expected to die the same way. But as he watched the Velthary ships burn, something stirred inside him. A feeling he had not experienced in many years. Hope Grell shared the video with 3 friends he trusted. They shared it with others. Within a week, every Morvathi on the planet had seen it. Within 2 weeks, they had a plan. The uprising began at dawn on the day the Velthary called Harvest Festival. When the orbital stations above Morvath were lightly staffed, thousands of Morvathi workers seized control of the mining equipment and turned it against their overseers. Others stormed the shuttle bays and captured the ships that carried ore to the stations above by nightfall. The Morvathi controlled their own world for the first time in 200 years. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The Fenari, small furry creatures who served as domestic workers in Velthary households, organized a massive strike. They simply stopped working. All of them, everywhere, on the same day. Velthary cities ground to a halt as food went uncooked, children went untended, and the thousands of small tasks that kept society running were suddenly left undone. The Crethoni, an insectoid species with a hive-based society, were divided in their response. Their hive queen, a massive being named Zixora, had supported the council for centuries. But her younger daughters, the princesses who would one day lead hives of their own, had grown restless. They had watched the human victory and seen possibilities their mother could not imagine. Princess Vexus, the boldest of Zixora's daughters, requested an audience with her mother. She brought data from human broadcasts, economic projections showing the declining power of the council, and intelligence reports about growing unrest across the galaxy. The old order is dying, Vexus told her mother. We can die with it, or we can help build something new. Zixora was silent for a long time. She was ancient, even by Crethoni standards, and she had seen many things in her long life. She had seen species rise and fall. She had seen empires crumble and civilizations vanish. She had learned to survive by choosing the winning side. Tell me about these humans, she said finally. Ambassador Daniel Carter received the invitation to visit the Crethni, homeworld with a mixture of hope and caution. He had heard stories about Queen Zixora, none of them reassuring. She was said to be cunning, patient, and utterly ruthless. But she was also powerful. If the Crethoni broke with the council, it would shake the galaxy. Daniel traveled to the Crethoni world aboard a diplomatic vessel named the Olive Branch. He was met at the landing pad by Princess Vexus herself, who escorted him through tunnels carved into the living rock of the hive. My mother is curious about you, Vexus said as they walked. She wants to understand why you fight. We fight because we want to be free, Daniel replied. The same reason anyone fights. Vexus made a clicking sound that Daniel had learned to interpret as laughter. Many species have wanted freedom. None of them defeated the council. What makes humans different? Daniel thought about the question for a moment. Maybe nothing, he admitted. Maybe we are just too stubborn to know when we are beaten. Or maybe we have learned that giving up is worse than dying. Either way, we are not going to stop. His meeting with Queen Zixora lasted 3 hours. The Great Queen listened as Daniel explained humanity's position, their goals, and their hopes for the future. He offered an alliance based on mutual respect and shared defense. He promised nothing he could not deliver and asked for nothing the Crethoni could not give. When he finished, Zixora was quiet for a long time. Her massive compound eyes studied him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Then she spoke. You are either very brave or very foolish, she said, but you are also honest. That is rare among diplomats. She turned to her daughter. Vexus, prepare a message for the council. Tell them that the Crethni hive will no longer participate in the blockade of human space. Tell them we are reconsidering our relationship with the council. Daniel could hardly believe what he was hearing. Your Majesty, this will make you enemies. I have survived many enemies, Zixora replied. I intend to survive many more. The council is weak, Ambassador. I can smell it. And I have always preferred to stand with the strong. News of the Crethni withdrawal spread quickly. Other species, encouraged by this defection, began making their own moves. The Sorvan Confederation, a loose alliance of trading species, declared neutrality in the conflict. The Velian Republic, long resentful of Council interference in their affairs, opened secret negotiations with humanity. Lieutenant Commander Scott Palmer led a volunteer force to help the Morvathi defend their newly liberated world. He was 32 years old, a Marine who had grown up in Texas and joined the military straight out of high school. He had never expected to command an interstellar mission. But life had a way of surprising people. Scott and his team trained Morvathi fighters, helped them build defenses, and stood beside them when the Velthari sent ships to reclaim the planet. The battle was fierce but brief. The Morvathi, fighting for their freedom with human weapons and human tactics, drove the attackers away. Dr. Samantha Blake, a physician who had volunteered for humanitarian work, set up medical stations across the liberated territories. She treated wounded rebels, trained local doctors, and delivered supplies to populations that had been neglected for generations. Her work saved thousands of lives and earned humanity countless friends. The galaxy was changing. What had begun as a single act of defiance had grown into a movement. Species that had been divided for centuries found common cause against their shared oppressors. Trade networks formed outside Council control. Information flowed freely for the first time in living memory. High Speaker Zorvax watched his empire crumble and did not know how to stop it. Every move he made seemed to push more species toward rebellion. Every threat he issued was met with defiance rather than submission. The tools that had worked for thousands of years were suddenly useless. In a desperate attempt to regain control, he called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. He demanded that all member species recommit to the war against humanity. He threatened punishment for any who wavered. Half the seats in the Great Hall were empty. The old order was dying. Something new was being born. And at the center of it all, humanity stood firm, a small species that had refused to kneel and changed the galaxy forever. Daniel Carter looked at the stars and allowed himself to hope that the worst was over. But deep down, he knew that the hardest part was still to come. It was not enough to tear down the old system. They had to build something better in its place. That would be the real challenge. The request for a summit came on a cold morning in February. 3 years after Daniel Carter had first refused the Council's demands, a Velthari diplomatic vessel appeared at the edge of human space, broadcasting a message of peace on all frequencies. High Speaker Zorvax wanted to negotiate. President Laura Mitchell received the news in her office in Geneva. She was older now, her hair completely white, her face lined with the weight of decisions that had shaped history. But her eyes were still sharp, and her mind was still clear. He wants to meet on neutral ground, her aide reported. A space station in unclaimed territory, outside both Council and human jurisdiction. Laura nodded slowly. Tell him I agree, but make clear that I will not come alone. 2 weeks later, the summit began. The station had been chosen for its remoteness. A small trading post on the edge of known space where smugglers and merchants conducted business away from the eyes of governments. It had been emptied for the occasion, its docking bays filled with ships from a dozen different species. President Mitchell arrived aboard a human cruiser, escorted by a fleet of warships. But she was not the only leader present. Queen Zixora of the Krethni had come in her personal transport, surrounded by her warrior daughters. Grell, now chairman of the Free Morvathi Council, had traveled from his homeworld to witness this moment. Representatives from the Sorvan Confederation, the Velian Republic, the Fenari Collective, and 27 other species filled the station's main hall. They stood together, united by their shared resistance to the old order, waiting for the being who had once ruled them all. High Speaker Zorvax entered alone. His crystalline body, once vibrant with power, now seemed dim and faded. The purple light that flickered through him was weak, uncertain. He looked at the assembled leaders and saw the end of everything he had known. President Mitchell, he said, his voice still carrying the formal tones of council protocol. I come to discuss terms. Laura remained seated. Terms of what, High Speaker? Your surrender? A ripple of murmurs ran through the hall. Zorvax's light flickered red for a moment, then settled back to dim purple. Terms of peace, he said carefully. The Council recognizes that the current situation is unsustainable. We are prepared to make significant concessions. Reduced oversight of human military activities, restoration of trade relations, perhaps even a seat on the Council itself. Laura let him finish. Then she shook her head. You misunderstand why we are here, High Speaker. We did not come to negotiate terms of our surrender. We came to offer you something better. She stood and walked to the center of the hall, where a holographic display flickered to life. It showed a document, pages of text in dozens of languages. This is the charter for the Allied Stellar Federation, Laura explained. A voluntary union of species based on mutual respect, shared defense, and free cooperation. There are no dominant races in this federation. No subjugated peoples. No demands backed by threats of violence. Zorvac studied the document, his crystalline face unreadable. You would replace the Council with this? We would offer an alternative, Laura replied. Any species that wishes to join may do so freely. Any species that wishes to remain independent may do so as well. There are no requirements except a commitment to peaceful cooperation and the Velthary. What place would we have in this federation? Laura looked at him steadily. The same place as anyone else? Equal partners with equal rights and equal responsibilities. No more, no less. The silence that followed seemed to last forever. Zorvac stood motionless, processing what he had heard. Around him, the assembled leaders waited, their eyes fixed on the being who had once held absolute power over the galaxy. Finally, Zorvac spoke. The Velthary have ruled the Council for 8,000 years. We have shaped the course of galactic civilization. We have maintained order and stability across hundreds of worlds. And now you ask us to give that up? To become just one species among many? I am not asking you to give up anything except the right to dominate others, Laura replied. You can keep your culture, your traditions, your way of life. You simply cannot force them on anyone else. Zorvac's light shifted through several colors, emotions that Laura had never learned to read. Then, slowly he bowed his head. I need time to consider this proposal, he said quietly. But I will say this. You have surprised me, President Mitchell. I expected you to demand our destruction. I expected revenge for the suffering we caused. Instead, you offer us a place at your table. We are not interested in revenge, Laura said. We are interested in building something better. Something that works for everyone. The summit ended without a final agreement, but everyone present knew that the old order was finished. Over the following months, species began joining the Federation one by one. The Crethini were among the first, followed by the Morvathi and the Fenari. Even some former Council loyalists, seeing which way the wind was blowing, applied for membership. The Velthary held out for nearly a year. Their society was deeply divided between those who wanted to accept the new reality and those who clung to dreams of past glory. But eventually, even they recognized that isolation would only lead to decline. On a quiet day in late autumn, High Speaker Zorvac signed the Federation Charter and became one of 42 founding members of the new Galactic Order. The celebrations on Earth lasted for a week. People danced in the streets, watched fireworks light up the sky, and embraced strangers like old friends. After years of war and hardship, peace had finally arrived. Admiral Kevin Torres retired to a colony world called New Hope, where he bought a small house overlooking an alien ocean. He spent his days writing his memoirs and teaching history to young students who could barely imagine a time when humans were not respected throughout the galaxy. Dr. Nicole Grant received the first Interstellar Science Award for her work on wormhole technology. Her discovery had not only helped humanity survive the blockade, but had revolutionized travel for dozens of species. She continued her research. Always pushing the boundaries of what was thought possible, Captain Megan Sullivan fully recovered from her injuries and returned to active duty. She became an instructor at the new Federation Military Academy, training pilots from a dozen different species. Her students called her the Hero of Soul, a title she always rejected with a laugh. Lieutenant Commander Scott Palmer settled on Morvath, where he had formed deep friendships during the liberation. He married a Morvathi woman named Kella, the first human Morvathi marriage in history. Their children became symbols of the new era of cooperation. Ambassador. Daniel Carter served 3 terms as Secretary General of the Allied Stellar Federation before stepping down to teach. At the Galactic Academy on the Nexus, he never forgot the day he stood before the Council and said no. That single word had changed everything on Earth. A monument was built in Geneva, at the site where President Mitchell had first addressed the United Nations after refusing the Council's demands. It showed a human hand reaching upward toward the stars, surrounded by the symbols of every species that had joined the Federation. The inscription at its base was simple. We refused to kneel. We chose to stand together. Tourists came from across the galaxy to see it. Many of them were young, born after the war, who knew the old council only from history lessons. They looked at the monument and wondered what it must have been like to live in those times. When the fate of civilizations hung in the balance, the elders who remembered told them stories. They spoke of fear and courage, of darkness and hope. They spoke of a small species on a small planet that had looked at an empire and refused to bow. And they spoke of what came after. Not perfect peace, but something better than what had been. A galaxy where every species had a voice. Where cooperation replaced coercion. Where the strong protected the weak instead of exploiting them. It was not paradise. There were still conflicts, still injustices, still work to be done. But it was better. And it had all started with a single word. No. Sometimes that was all it took to change the universe.